Okay, it's rather splendid to be here with a Six to Watch panel for, I think, the first time we've ever had one dedicated just to the Six to Watch, so thank you, Caption, for that. Is everybody aware of what the Broken Frontier Six to Watch is, or have you heard of it? No, some of you nodding, some of you shaking your heads. Okay, well, in that case, I shall give you a little intro to it just to begin. Every year, Broken Frontier, we should probably have asked if everybody's aware of what Broken Frontier is. Okay, right, we're looking for that one. Every year, for the last 11 years now, we have picked 6 emerging creators that we think really represent some of the best work and most varied and diverse work that you can see in the self-publishing scene in the country. And what we do is we try and guide them through the year. We give them lots of coverage on the site, so everything they submit will be reviewed. They get a spotlight feature interview. There's opportunities for other sort of coverage as well. And off the site, if they want to take it up, they can have mentoring advice from me. They can be part of the Six to Watch Discord community where we share thoughts and take part in events, panels like this. We've run exhibitions, we've published books with their work, and it's all with an eye to raising their profiles and getting them seen, hopefully, by publishers. So, if we could go to the next. So, over the years, these are some of the publishers that Six to Watch artists have gone on to be picked up by. So, from self-publishing to be picked up by 2000 AD, Rebellion, Abrams, Every Hill, Boom Studios, Dark Horse Comics, Faber, Fantagraphics, Graphic Universe. I'm quite proud of this, so I'm going to go through them all. Icon Books, Image Comics, Jonathan Cake, Kaguchi Press, Kush Comics, Myriad Editions, Self-Made Hero, Seven Stories Press, Street Noise Books, Titan, and I want to pronounce it Z2, but it's Z2 Comics as well. So some of these things have happened directly because we've featured the artists on the site. A lot of them, though, were going to be a natural progression, but it goes to show a kind of twofold way. Firstly, sometimes we can affect things. Secondly, though, these are people you should be watching, as the title suggests, because they do go on to be picked up by publishers. So, get in there early and start following them from the very beginning. Right, so that's a little bit about the Six to Watch. Now let's put the spotlight on them themselves. So what we're going to do, I'm going to talk to them very quickly. We're going to do some introductions, then I'm going to talk to them individually about their work, and then if there's time at the end, we'll talk more about their experiences self-publishing and sort of building profiles in the community, and hopefully we'll get some questions from some of you towards the end as well. Right, I'm going to just set my phone down so I can see what the time is. Every year the font size of this gets bigger and bigger. Okay, so I'm just going to ask each of you, we'll start with Cara, just to give us a quick introduction to yourselves and your work, and remind me, as an old man who forgets these things, what year you were a Six to Watch artist.
Six to Watch 2025. Okay, so yay. I'm Cara. About me, I'm from Liverpool, and I've just graduated uni. I was studying comics and concept art at Leeds Arts University. So I want to continue doing comics, hopefully, yes. And I've self-published now, maybe at least 4 comics, I think. It keeps growing, so. But my the biggest one that I've done so far, and it's the most recent, is Everything's Fine, which is an autobiocomic, basically just about myself while I was going through the motions. But yeah, I think that's it about me.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Mike Armstrong. I've self-published a couple of short mini-comics, silent mini-comics, one called Bigger, one called Span. I do a lot of work with a London-based group called Whip Comics, a couple of members of which are here today, which is lovely. I've done stuff for their anthology for the past 4 years, and last year and this year I'm designing it. I also worked on a webcomic for a while, which was based on the video game Sea of Thieves. That was called Skeleton Crew. I did that for about 3 years off and on. And I'm working on a graphic novel called Rose Thornhill and the Law Library, which is still sort of in the reboot concept stage, but it's earmarked for a lot of my time next year, and I'm due to have something in the next issue of Box's anthology, which is due out next month. So yeah, I'm the old man of the group. Came to sort of self-publishing comics quite late, and I was Broken Frontier 6 to Watch 2024, I think that's right.
I'm Dominique Duong. I was Broken Frontier 6 to Watch of 2020, the COVID year, the lockdown year. But it was still a really good experience, and even if we couldn't go out and do events like comic fairs or zine fairs or anything, like Andy, Broken Frontier were really supportive during this, and yeah, it was a really good experience even so. I've self-published a few short comics and zines. Probably my most well-known one is The Dog and the Cat, which it's Chinese Zodiac inspired queer romance story that was nominated for an Ignatz as well. And then I've done other ones like The Black Cloud, which is more of a collection of illustrations about my mental health struggles at the time, and then also my short horror The Flower Maiden, about a Victorian horror girl makes a deal with the devil and pays the price for it kind of story. At the moment I'm working on my debut graphic novel with Jonathan Capes, Patchwork. Again, another queer fantasy romance, but it also deals a lot with grief and bereavement, and struggles with difficult parent relationships. So that's hopefully coming out 2027, I think is the estimate now. But I'm still making it right now, still trying to finish it. But hopefully that will be done at some point.
Cool. I'm Shane Melisse from London. I was working Frontier 6 to Watch back in 2021. I've been doing publishing comics for quite a while now, over 10 years I think. My work's varied a lot over the years, from slice of life, diary comics, to horror parodies, Bananas Pajamas horror parodies, and most recent stuff is my Road Night comics, which is a dark fantasy London, kind of combining streetwear and armor, and trying to highlight London life with fancy aesthetic. So it's mostly nights eating and drinking and ignoring each other. And yeah, at the moment, I have an agent that's been supporting me with creating a pitch for a graphic novel for Road Night to hopefully even late this year or early next year to pitch to publishers, and hopefully something happens with that. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's our panel. Now I'm going to ask a question that I often get pulled up on because people say it's boring, but I don't think it is. I think at the moment, given all the different kind of ways that people discovering comics and how the landscape continues to change, I'm just going to ask you a very obvious question of how did you first discover the form, and what was your entry point into the medium?
Well, for me, I'm not sure. I think maybe I started off with manga. Okay, so I think I bought my first manga maybe when I was 11 or 12, and since that point I was sucked into this whole new world, right? But I didn't start getting, well, I used to search up videos on how to draw manga and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't until I think maybe it was 2020 I started to actually draw my own comics. I had attempted before and I'd always failed because I was always gonna do such a big project. I was I'm gonna make this really long comic series and it's gonna be like this and it's gonna be so good, and then I'll do 3 pages and then get burnt out because it's obviously too much for for like the first comic you made. But in 2020 I started doing short comics. I think my first one was Umbrella Boy, which is one of the first ones I got printed as well. But since then it's just been like an insane journey.
Yeah, I got started because of my dad. So he worked for IPC magazines back in the 70s, and he was on, he did stuff for Action and 2000 AD, mainly as a writer. He worked on stuff like Hookjaw, did some development stuff for Dan Dare, and he cast a sort of a very long shadow over that kind of thing, over the whole comics thing, and he really got my brother and I into drawing comics from a very young age, like constantly buying us like the Beano and the Dandy and all these things, and giving us encouragement in our writing and our drawing, which was lovely. And I kind of was a lapsed artist for a while, and then I started drawing this webcomic just because I had a throwaway joke I thought that Reddit might like. And they really liked it, and I just kept doing it, and I thought, oh, I want to do something a bit longer. So I then fell in with Whip Comics in 2021, I think it was. And yeah, that just, it was a feedback loop. It was like doing more comics got me in the mood to do more comics, and yeah, I'm still doing it now, which is good.
As a kid, I grew up reading the Beano and the Dandy as well all the time, and also Calvin and Hobbes, but I don't really think I considered doing comics myself until I got older, and I was reading a lot of manga, and then got into Western independent comics and series as well, because I was never really into superhero stuff, and that put me off Western comics. But then I realized there's actually lots of independent graphic novels and like series as well out there that aligned more with my kind of interests. It's this is something I could actually do myself, and I started considering going into comics and doing illustration and stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, I guess it was my brother. He's a lot older than me. I guess he grew up in the 80s, so he had a pretty decent collection of X-Men and Spider-Man comics. And I remember I was about maybe 3-4 years old looking at them, and just I always liked drawing from day one, I guess. I would always just try to copy panels from his comics. And then I remember when I discovered that it was actually an X-Men animated cartoon, I was like, oh my god, it's just like the comics, and I got super excited about that. And then my teen years got really into mangas as well. I was always aware of manga, but I guess in the mid-90s, most manga content was always adult, and I think my only intake at the time was the Street Fighter animated movie, which I really loved, but I guess wasn't really for my age. I was 6 watching it, but I thought it was being really into video games, so I loved it anyway. And then yeah, I remember meeting a group of friends around Camden when I was 16, who was also really into mangas and comics, and we tried ourselves to create our own collective, but it was we were in school just doing it for fun, and it kind of fizzled out pretty quickly. And then I went to uni, studied product design in St. Martin's, nothing to do with comics. I enjoyed it as a course, but after doing that, I realised it wasn't for me as a career, and that experience highlighted how much more I like comics. So when I graduated, I just the following week just drew comics and tried to get good at it. And the starting point for me for starting my career, I suppose, was actually just going to Gosh Comics and simply asking them, I want to make comics, can you give me any tips of where to start, or printers to use? And they were Comic Print UK. I was that's a pretty basic name, I could have Googled that. And then they mentioned about, at the time, there was an event called Process, where comic creators would literally talk about the process of creating comics. And they were there's one happening next week, come to that. So I did, and that's when I met the collective at the time, Backwards Birds, which I just went to the talk and got along with them, ended up joining that group, and we did a Kickstarter, and yeah, that's kind of the starting point of me doing events and making comics, and kind of mixing in with a community of artists who I met through Gosh Comics, really.
Right, Steve Walsh.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, Steve Walsh, yeah.
Much missed. Okay, so Dom, I'm going to start with you. Could we go back to just one further back barrier, the black back, basically, thank you. So this is the zine that I first discovered your work from. I don't know if I've told you this or not.
No, you did.
I did, okay. And it was something that you contributed to the community table at Southampton Comic and Zine Fair. So this is a really good example of if you get involved with things, events, you can get discovered just through putting something on the community table, because it's where I found this particular zine from Dom. So, as you mentioned, it's about mental health awareness and sort of visual metaphor and illustrations along those lines. It's something you've explored in other work as well, in the Mind Over Margins anthology from Kondratiev. So what is it about comics that makes them such a strong medium for communicating experiences like this for you?
I think, I've always been drawing throughout all my life, and then also writing stories as well. Like, they're both things I love doing, and comics just seems like a very natural way to combine both of them without sacrificing like one or the other. Because I have a very visual brain, and I can't imagine, even when I'm reading like a prose book, I'll be envisioning what's happening in my mind as well. So it's just for me, I can't really separate the two. I think I'm happiest when I'm getting to do both of them. And sometimes, with the Black Cloud as well, for that was mainly just a collection of illustrations together. And for that one, I think basically because I didn't always want to go into comics. Originally, I wanted to go into concept art, like designing characters and things like that. So I focused on that at uni, and then got a job as an artist at a indie mobile game studio startup, which was not very good, because what startup ever is, to be honest. And during that, I kind of realized that I don't really enjoy being in games. I don't because with games, especially in indie studios and stuff, when you're first starting out, you have to kind of do a lot of the things that maybe you're not necessarily interested in doing. I was doing all of the artwork, not just character stuff, but animation, UI, and then they really wanted me to learn 3D, but I don't like doing it either, and it's just really difficult to start learning when you haven't ever done it before. And I just kind of realized I don't think games is really for me ultimately. I'm more of an illustration kind of person. And also with the startup, again, it was a very cursed startup. They let some of us go, in the end. I was one of the first people to go. And so post redundancy, I was basically trying to make it as an illustrator full time, and it wasn't really working. And I was still living with my parents, and so I wasn't doing very well mentally with all of that. And so that's where the Black Cloud came from, because I started making those illustrations just to try and get some of those feelings out, and to find a way to express them as well, that in a healthy way, that wasn't having an actual mental breakdown. So this, I guess it was kind of therapy for me, really. And yeah, that's how it came about.
So in 2021, Self-Made Hero recognised you and you were part of their graphic anthology programme, and you're part again of their anthology Catalyst.
Yes.
So as a sort of mentorship programme, how important an experience was that for you as an emerging creator?
I'd say it's one of the best education experiences I've had, far more valuable than the time I did illustration at uni, far more educational, to be honest, because with my illustration course at uni, it was very although we would have talks and crits with the tutors, otherwise it was quite hands-off. It's here's the project theme and the thing you have to do, go and research and go do it, but not a lot of whole teaching of practical things or techniques or anything like that. Whereas with the graphic anthology program, because we had several established comic artists who are our mentors and would do like workshops and things with set homework for us, and then like we'd have our own personal mentor as well who would go over our work and like offer critique and such.
They're quite big names as well.
So it was really useful, the most useful educational experience I've had ever, because it was so focused on comics as well, that made it even more useful specifically for comics education too. So I learned a lot. My mentor was Sonia, and she was really good. She offered lots of constructive feedback, and she really helped me get better as a comic artist specifically.
Right. Can we move on to the dog and the cat? Thank you. Okay, so you've said to me in the past at Broken Frontier that you want to bring more of the culture into your work. So with that in mind, and let's just underline this is an Ignatz-nominated comic as well, just elaborate a little more on the dog and the cat and its themes.
So originally the dog and the cat, it was meant to be for an anthology, so I pitched it to them for the call out and they say, oh yeah, we love it, we want it. And it was originally meant to be an 8-pager, but then 2020 happened, everything went into lockdown, and we all got an email from the organisers who were really sorry, but we're going to have to cancel the anthology. We don't really have the time and capacity to do it anymore. And so I was like, well, I've still got this idea. I really like this idea. And also, I was still working at that time, but just moved to working fully from home. So I was fortunate enough to not have to worry about work or money or anything. So it's well, we're all stuck at home. I don't have anything else to do. I might as well take this idea and make it into its own thing. So I ended up expanding the story to, I can't remember, 20-something pages, which ultimately I think it did actually really need, because I don't know what I would have done with 8, to be honest. And I think it's a lot better for being having the space to breathe and everything. And over the course of 2020, I made the comic, and I think, although I think at that point it was the longest comic I'd made then, and there were some things that were a little janky about it, the text size, but I think even now I'm still pretty proud of it. It's it's a work that really takes everything that I love most, fantasy, really character-focused, relationship-focused dynamics in the story, and also taking aspects of my culture that I'm able to talk about that might not be as well known to other people as well. So I think it's a work I'm really proud of still.
As you should be. Ignatz. Okay. Can we jump ahead a couple? Right. Now, you're currently working on your first full-length graphic novel, as you said, Patchwork. Jonathan Kate. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the premise of Patchwork?
So with Patchwork, the premise is it's historical fantasy sort of world. You have one of the main characters, Ezra. He lives in this tiny little village. He's recently lost his father a few months back, but they had a very difficult relationship, and so he's been struggling a lot to deal with with grieving, but it's also very complicated as well, and so he's not in a very good place mentally. And then the other main character, Tian, arrives to the village, and he's this he calls himself a patchworker, a witch whose focus is on repairing things, fixing things, whether it's actual physical things, but also sort of emotional issues as well. And they sort of start off butting heads, but as time goes on they get to know each other better, they develop an understanding, feelings for each other. But Tian also has some dark secrets that he's been running from, that he's been hiding from, and the story is ultimately culminates in how is he going to deal with these problems he's been running away from. And although it's a romance, it's also a story about dealing with grief and the sort of difficult legacies our parents can leave us when they're gone. So cheerful things.
We'll look forward to that in 2027.
Yeah.
Right, Cara. So I think people are familiar with your work, it's definitely going to be from your autobiographical comic, Everything's Fine. So, yeah, again, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're exploring its pages?
Well, Everything's Fine. I'm trying to think about what pushed me to make it, but I think it was because I was at a sort of point in my life where I was going from my childhood to adulthood, right? So I wrote it just before my 20th birthday. I think I finished it a little bit after my 20th birthday, but I started it way before. And basically just me confronting all of the things I've held in, because I'm the sort of person who like buries their emotions sometimes because, well, you can't really explain that, I suppose, but it really was mainly about like mental health and kind of holding grudges in a way, I'd say. I feel like I did hold a lot of grudges, and that making that comic really helped me like get over everything, really. Because like you can think about things for years, like things people have done to you and things that just have no explanation.
There's some really powerful imagery on this. Just to let me see a bit more. Are the copies available?
I have some with me,
have some
only a
with you,
few though, so
okay,
they're limited.
I mean, given those coming of age and mental health kind of, themes, did it feel cathartic once it was out there?
It was, I really wasn't expecting it to be such a release, you know, like, I'm not sure exactly how to describe how I felt, but it was, like, as I was drawing the pages, like, I could feel, like, the emotions coming out. I was like, so, and then once it was all done, and I could see it, and then read it, and then put it away, it felt so good. I still don't know how I feel about people reading it, but...
Well, I was going to ask that, because, I mean, is there a sense of kind of vulnerability? Because you've really put yourself out there on the page, and I ask this of everybody that does autobiographical comics that have a particular profound kind of nature to them.
Yeah, sometimes I do feel a bit like exposed, but I do think it's more valuable to have those kind of works out there, because it like I've had people come up to me and like at conventions and say like they have been wanting to get my comic and then they've read it and they've said like they've related to it a lot. So I think a lot of people forget that we're all experiencing the same world that we're living on, and a lot of us have very similar experiences. A lot of us have very different experiences as well, but the similarities can like bring us together as well. I think it's very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of sort of universality to the things that people explore in Tobai. And I think if you read this, there's going to be a lot that will resonate with everybody. Let's jump on one more. Right, so Umbrella Boy, one of your horror comics. So what drew me to your work when I was thinking about last year's Six to Watch, and I have this long list over here. I think it's whittled down to a short list. I have a horrible thing of choosing just 6 people from that short list. But it was a way that you can shift your approach so readily from, and again, the way that you've proven that you can work in different genres as well. So with that in mind, given how many kind of styles you've used, who are your sort of influences or your inspirations?
Well, I think you can tell from this, very obviously, Junji Ito. This was actually my first comic, that's Umbrella Boy. So that's from basically my very beginning, and I feel like looking back at that now, I feel like the influences are taking over rather than myself coming through. But Junji Ito is like,
yeah.
After I read Uzumaki, like my life changed. also, I think from my autobio side, I got a lot of influence from Zoe Thorogood. I think also just because she just lays it all out very openly as well, and I really felt like a sort of familiarity with that, I suppose. It felt very familiar, her work, and then I felt like I just connected with that as well. There's a few webtoon artists that I really was influenced by, but I can't really remember the names right now.
That's absolutely fine.
But, yeah.
This one I love because, and this comes again, if we have time at the end where we can talk about getting your work out there and getting it seen. But this is from, is it an upcoming anthology? Let's see, let me
Let us in, yeah. It's, I actually don't know when it's coming out. I think it was delayed, but this is, I had an 8-pager in Let Us In, which is an anthology that's it's by lots of different creators all from outside the US. So there's some from like Peru, there's some from Spain, there's like everywhere basically. And we all came together to write an anthology basically about what it's like to be a comic artist who's like not in like the place to be for comics. So that's coming out soon, hopefully. I actually have no idea, but it will be out.
I just love the bottom right panel. This is you trying to get your comic into a shop.
Yeah.
And the way you've portrayed yourself as, everything's daunting and you're sort of below it all.
Yeah. I can't wait for you to see like the final version because those are just the first few panels I drew, and I've got a really dramatic shot of like something similar. So
I shall look forward to reviewing that.
Yeah.
And you're also working on your comic Star's
Star's finished now. Actually.
Right. Is it out?
No, it's not out yet. But I'm not sure if I'm going to release it before or during Thought Bubble, but that's what I'm aiming for. I have a lot of comics to debut at Thought Bubble this year, actually. Star is basically, it was a comic I did for university, actually, and it's about a musician, because I'm a musician as well, and I felt like I wanted to bring together, stories from, not necessarily stories, but experiences from music and art together. And it was touching a lot on like what it's like to be like a female in the music industry, and how easy it is to be manipulated and put into a position where you never thought you would be in. So it gets quite heavy. I wanted to make it as kind of shocking but realistic as possible, because like these are very real experiences. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's very heavy on the sort of manipulation and abuse side of the music industry.
So Thought Bubble is always a nice place to go, isn't it? So I look forward to that. Okay, Mike. I first discovered your work via the comic anthologies, the Big Business strip in Whip XL, which was like one big flowing panel across the page, which I thought at the time that's outstanding. He's on my list. So, given that you've mostly worked or in terms of the stuff that's been published, you've mostly worked in short form work. What are the particular skills you think that are needed to tell a story in such a kind of confined narrative space?
Really, you have to have a story that can be told in like just a very short form. I guess when I started doing comics, really, I was really heavily influenced by Calvin and Hobbes and Bill Watterson and sort of newspaper cartoon strips. So I started off doing short form comics where it was 3-4 panels, So you have a very short time to tell a joke. So moving on to stuff like when I was doing anthology work with Whip, suddenly having more pages was a bit of a luxury, and I could tell sort of a bit more of an in-depth story. But I think if you start small, start doing 4-panel comics and stuff like that, it's actually really valuable because it helps you be able to trim out the fat from your story, get a concept across in as few drawings as possible, and just generally have a manageable narrative. And what's great about the newspaper strips is, it's 4 panels and you're done. You have a complete thing, so that you've got the dopamine hit of actually finishing something. And the full page one on that one was kind of like it works as a single panel. So that was a nice big sort of thing that I thought, yeah, okay, that's doable. I can do that in the deadline and get that over to Joe before he starts yelling.
So, two of your recent mini comics, Bigger and Span, they're again they're beautifully composed short stories, but they use extended visual metaphor to touch on quite familiar themes with sort of fantasy bent to them. So, can you tell us a bit about the themes that you were exploring with those? I think, just go on. That's Bigger, and then the next one is Span.
So, Bigger was born out of an experience I had a few years ago when so my dad and my stepmom and my half sisters moved down to Australia about 20 years ago now, and I hadn't seen my dad in person for about 7 years, and he'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's. It wasn't Parkinson's, but that's what they diagnose it as. And seeing him sort of in a different state kind of opened my eyes, and I was able to look back at my relationship with him over the years and realise that when you're young, you kind of tend to see your parents as these unknowable giants. And when you come back to it and look at it with an adult's eyes, you can see that you're not so different, and you can see why they made the decisions they made, and you can see that they're not unknowable. They are just human beings trying to do the best they can. And my daughter was quite young at the time, and I could see the cyclical nature of sort of me growing up with my dad and then my daughter growing up with me, and sort of seeing how it all continues. So that's really what it was for, and I chose to do it as a silent thing because I did it for Manga G-Man, which, if anyone doesn't know, is a yearly competition run by the Japanese embassy, and they asked people to do an 8-page story, which is really useful. It's a good thing to do because you get an 8-page comic at the end of it. Span is an idea I've had kicking around in my head for a long time, but after my marriage broke down, it really became solidified in my head. And it's, on the face of it, it's quite an emotional story about a relationship that goes wrong, but it's actually more about hope and about how things can carry on, and you just need to open yourself up and sort of be willing to meet people halfway, and not sort of, no person is an island kind of thing.
I love the way you embed these deeper things into sort of fantasy storytelling. It's really effective. So you are working on something longer form?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
I started doing a graphic novel when I first joined Whip. I wanted to get some feedback on it. So Whip Comics is a sort of a London-based thing, and I know there's a couple of people here from Whip, which is great. We sort of give each other feedback about what we do, and I wanted to get a bit of feedback on what I was doing. So I joined to sort of get some of that, and it made me realise, sort of everyone sharing their experiences and sharing feedback and stuff, made me realise that what I had already done was was okay, but really needed sort of a bit more focus. So I'm rebooting it, and it's a fantasy-based story. It's about a girl called Rose Thornhill who comes across the sort of the parallel world of Fae, and it's about really British folklore and the magic and stuff that the English folklore and the English folk stories are really based on, and we're very heavily into that in this country in particular. And yeah, I've read a lot of folk stories and stuff, and I'm really looking forward to kind of exploring that. I'm deliberately sort of aiming the art style more at 9 to 14-year-olds, and it's the age my daughter is. So
Makes sense.
yeah, I'm kind of writing it for her, but trying to make it as universal as I can, and I've got different journeys for all the characters and stuff, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of getting back into that world.
And you're in the upcoming Boxes anthology.
I am, yeah. So that's a story again that was born out of my own health issues. There's an artist who finds that she's dropping things, and it's because she's got the term for it has left my brain. But it's polyneuropathy, that's it. So it's tingling in the fingers, loss of sensation in the fingers. So she's an artist, and she keeps dropping things, and she gets very frustrated. But she takes it as kind of a death sentence for her craft, and she pours herself into that, and all her personal relationships kind of deteriorate. So it's a fun, uplifting story, and that's coming out, I think, next month. It will definitely be done in time for Thought Bubble. And it was very cathartic to do, because it was, again, drawing on experiences not only from health things, got a bit of neuropathy from diabetes, that's kind of under control now, thankfully, but also sort of the breakdown of my marriage and stuff. So I'm pouring myself into the page. It's all, comics is good therapy. It's cheap therapy.
Brilliant. If you haven't picked up any of the Boxes anthologies, you really should. They are fantastic showcases for the UK scene. Third Bear Press is the publisher. So Shane, I literally just create what I feel like. That was a full quote from the interview we did with you in your 6 to Watch year, and you are one of the most versatile creators I know in the UK scene, because you worked in everything from auto-bio to sort of comedy horror to drama, and even the odd kaiju comic. So, with that in mind, is that genre jumping approach a deliberate one?
I guess it's like, I don't think too hard about it, especially like when I first started out. Like, no one knows who I am, and to some degree that's still the case. So I thought, like, a privilege with that is that, like, no one has nothing to compare you to.
Yeah.
So, and also, I do a lot of work on my own. I do enjoy working with people, but ultimately it's like what gets me excited to do it, because, like, comics is really hard work, and it's really easy to get like demotivated at some point, especially if you're making something and you're like, you can get these negative thoughts of like, no one knows I'm making this, no one would care if I stop doing it, and all that sort of stuff. But if you're doing something that you genuinely enjoy and gets you excited when you wake up to do it, then like those thoughts don't really matter, because you just want to see what you're making. You want to get this idea in your head out on paper, regardless of like who likes it. And often if you generally enjoy what you're making, I think that energy shows a lot in your work, and people pick up on that. And like, even if it's not something they might necessarily be into to begin with, because I can see you enjoy making it, like, especially in person. I do a lot of events like art markets and comic cons and fairs and stuff, and I do often get comments from customers of like, I can see you really enjoy doing this, and I think that's because I just make what I want. And I don't always think too hard of like the audience, of what they want. If I do think about the audience, it's often my friends more than the creative audience, because I have no idea what people want really. And that trends change all the time. So I always just think of like the odd joke that someone who knows me might find funny, or like a scenario or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's kind of like how I stick to that really. I do feel like as time's gone by, I am narrowing down a tiny bit more to what I like making. So like, I don't think I'll go back to diary comics. But then I say that, I don't know, there's times that something comes up in my head and I'm like, that could be an idea, but it's also like, again, comics take a long time. So you have so many ideas, you have to pick what one you want to focus on.
Okay, this is my favourite single image from your work. This is from their Coming Down the Stairs, which is a kind of horror take on the Bananas in Pyjamas song. So yeah, tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, it's quite a short story really. I think it's literally I had the theme tune in my head one day, and I guess as a kid, like watching it, I did always think the song was a little bit eerie, and just the idea of like being chased by like big bananas down the stairs. And also at the time, I think I was going through a bit of like an old horror movie phase. So I remember really liking that Wes Craven film, People on the Stairs, I think it's called. And so yeah, it was kind of like a parody of that film as well. And then also like growing up as well, like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark. So it was kind of an attempt of making a sort of children's horror comic. But I'm not too sure the children part really stuck. But some kids do like it. I guess it's like young adults mostly. But at events, I have had like 10-year-olds like it, and it really depends on the parents. Some parents are like cool with it, and their kids seem to be quite like resilient to this sort of stuff. Where other parents are like, you like this now, but you'll be asking me to stay in the bed with you at midnight or something. Yeah, that's kind of much how that story came to be.
Right, now let's move on to your road stroke stage night comics. They seem to have really taken off for you in the last couple of years. What was the genesis of those?
Road Night. Road Night was like a thing that came up during lockdown. Yeah, basically it was like, I'm a big gamer and I was playing that video game Dark Souls, and I was listening to that rapper MF Doom, who up until that point, like, I knew a lot about his name and his visuals. Like a lot of comic artists that I follow on Instagram would do fan art of him, but I didn't really know his songs too well. And then with lockdown being like sort of like a time capsule period where you could just have so much time to spare, I started going through his like discography of music, and I was kind of like listening to MF Doom playing Dark Souls, and I thought his whole thing's about being a rap villain. So and Dark Souls is known to be like hard bosses and stuff. So I thought, he'd be a cool boss to have in the game. And then the idea of combining like hip hop style, like streetwear with medieval armor, kind of came to be.
We have another panel starting in 5 minutes, so
okay.
yeah, we have to time.
Yeah, I'll try and speed up then. So yeah, long story short, I just combined those two together, and then initially it was just like fashion illustrations, but born and raised in London, I thought I'd keep it within the London environment, and then they always say make what you know, so I was kind of like telling my like experiences a little bit of what I see and joke about with London, with like a fantasy twist to it, and being really into video games, I like put that in there too. So like this comic particularly was like a short comic I wanted to make of Road Night, because at the time what I had was like illustrations, didn't really have anything like narrative to it. And this one was like mostly an action-packed comic, like not really dialogue heavy, and it's kind of, those who play games, it's like Tony Hawk's meets Dark Souls is kind of like my pitch, that's like, at least with this comic, that's the story behind that one.
Okay, now as I've always written far too many questions and I've got time for, does anybody have any questions in the audience at all?
We only have 5 minutes, so
5 minutes is probably enough for any question.
Building up on something Mike said about writing this comic for your daughter, I think that's a really interesting dynamic. And I wonder if this happens more as you get older. Do you sort of have like an audience in mind versus when you're younger? Do you like create? I'm creating for myself, and everything I do is for myself. And then as you get older, you kind of think about who your audience might be. And yeah, I didn't phrase that well, but that's a question. And if anybody wants to put in their thoughts on it, basically.
Well, for this one, I have an audience in mind. Really, when my daughter got old enough to get into comics for herself, I wanted to do something that she would enjoy reading, and I secretly really enjoy to get something in the Phoenix, which is the comic she reads every week. I would really like to get something in there. So this is me sort of saying, this is the kind of thing I could do. I'm not in it for money or fame or anything. I would just really like to have something in there, and I could go, right, I've done that, goal complete. But for other stuff, for stuff like Span and bigger, I don't really have an audience specifically in mind for those. It's just a story that I think is kind of universal, and why I do comics, one of the reasons is because it's like a universal experience, and someone just might need to read it in that moment, and it might help them in some way to know that someone else has gone through it too. So that's why I do sort of the shorter form comics, to let people know that other people do feel the same way. Right, I think we're probably at the end now. So what I shall do on Blue Sky is I shall link to all of these fantastic people's social media things. I'm about, if anybody wants to ask anything about Open Frontier throughout the day, I'm only here for today, so you need to catch me this afternoon. Otherwise, you'll lose me until the next event. So thank you very much, Cara, Mike, Dom, Shane. It's been brilliant talking to you.